Yo, 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 what's good in the hood? Coming back in with a new rant because thankfully and not thankfully, we don't have any UFC cards coming up this week. But that doesn't mean I can't make a video for the sake of it because there's always something to think about. There's always something to discuss. There's always something to rant about. And that's my specialty. In this dark, cold world, I only have one true skill, and that is yapping about MMA. And you better believe I'm going to do it. So, if you haven't seen already, as I'm bobbing around my tabs, boop, 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 uh, Dana White, the big boss himself, he made some major announcements on Thanksgiving, no less, during the halftime of I believe it was the Cowboys football game. Pre-recorded on his phone somewhere, who knows where. Pretty unenthusiastic, but I mean, he announced some big fights. As a fight fan, you can't complain with some of these fights he announced. Obviously, the most pronounced one, the most prominent one, is Justin Gaethje returning after a teased retirement tour, facing Patty the Batty Pimblett for an intern lightweight belt. I won't go into it too much. Obviously, the current lightweight champion, Ilya Taporia, he's not vacating, but he has said that he can't fight the first quarter of the new year. So that means he's been ruled out of the Paramount. The first couple cards for the Paramount, and he's kind of respectful and was like, "Hey, like I'm not gonna hold this up while I'm getting through a nasty divorce." And I personally have never been married, but I've seen how divorces can go. They can go smooth, but more times than not, especially when you're talking millions of dollars and kids and all that stuff, they never go smooth. And so it's a pretty admirable decision on his part, but that obviously created a pickle at that top of the division where it's like, all right, well, what do you do? Interim lightweight title bout is always an excuse to slap it into a main event, 5 rounds, all that jazz. But that's really not the issue. Ilya, it's gonna happen, and you got to deal with it. The problem is, this is the main rant for today, is what do you do when the UFC starts booking just like they booked this other amazing title fight for the card after UFC 324, 325. You have fights that are being announced that fans and even some fighters too, they're saying, "Hey, this isn't fair. Hey, this is a sport, and you're not booking what should be considered, the top contender versus the champ, etc." Uh, and I'm going to give my 2 cents on this. And like I said, I'm going to keep this short and sweet because there's not much to discuss. I'll do a more in-depth breakdown of the actual fights because again, they're all pretty exciting fights. But let's divulge into it. There's obviously two big asterisks for some of these announced fights, and they are amazing. I mean, this is just one card. Umar, you have Alexa Grasso, Rose, Arnold Down versus Gene Silva, my boy Waldo. Where's Waldo versus the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. Sean O'Malley makes his return against a top 5 contender. Uh, and honestly, in some ways, the fact that Amanda Nunes has come out of retirement with only was about 2 months of promotion time to build for this. When it almost, I thought this was going to be she would come back for the White House. She's coming back pretty fast. And for some, there's a minor beef, and Ariel Helwani is one that has brought this up that he thinks it's kind of crazy that you have you know, a what's the word for it? Oh my god, a not in term. They're fighting for the undisputed belt. That's what I'm thinking. I big brain fart right there. But yeah, Kayla Harrison, obviously the undisputed bantamweight champion. She's fighting Amanda Nunes for the undisputed belt, but it got regulated to the co in favor of Justin Gaethje versus Patty. There's a lot of ways to look at it. You could argue Justin versus Patty is a more entertaining fight, even though Kayla versus Amanda is a more prestigious fight. It's gonna be apples and oranges. Yeah, if it was a pure sport, you would probably assume Kayla and Amanda should main event over Justin and Patty. I get where Dana's coming from and UFC's coming from. It's a business. Justin, Patty, it in some ways it just feels more impactful, or it's just gonna have. If we're being frank, it's probably gonna be a more entertaining fight. Therefore, and I actually might be some of the few on the other side that is very intrigued by Amanda's return. But at the end of the day, Justin, Patty, they're just probably more mainstream names. So getting past, for example, some gripes like Ariel Hawani's gripe, which is it's still a valid point. the two biggest gripes are obviously you have contenders in both the lightweight and the featherweight division. Let's see my rankings over here. So over in the lightweight, and the lightweight's actually probably a tad more tricky because Armin obviously just fought what about a week and a half ago. He's the rightful number one contender. He went out, he smoked Dan Hooker in 2 rounds. He's the big dog. He's the number one. He's probably the toughest fight in the whole division. The problem is obviously Ilya doesn't really have a timeline because divorces, who knows how long those get dragged out, and he's clearly not willing to get into a fight camp unless he knows he's got his children's custody, which again, you can hate on him all you want. That stuff's very important, especially when they're young, to just make sure that you have the custody to see them and all that. So you don't, who knows how that's gonna go. But he's out of the picture. It is what it is. It's a reasonable case to make an interim belt. The problem people are having, everyone's raising the flags, and I was too, but again, I don't know the full picture, is why is Armin not on this card? Don't get me wrong. Justin versus Patty, awesome fight. It's going to be an entertaining fight. It's a compelling fight style-wise. I personally lean towards Justin, but we'll go deeper into that down the road. The problem everyone's having is Armin, even though he just fought, he presumably, we saw he didn't take any damage really at all, unless he has an injury. But let's go off some tweets. Make it make sense. Hand smack. This is what Armin tweeted yesterday, about like 12, 13 minutes after Dana made the announcement. It makes me think that he did fight, like I said, a week and a half ago, but this card is until January 24th. That's around 8, 9 weeks, we'll say, 8, for him to, get back in and start prepping for one of these two, depending on who they would offer. I would guess Patty probably would get offered over Justin if they were going to put Armin in that picture. My only guess is maybe Armin wasn't ready, but based off that tweet, it seems like Armin was even offered it. And maybe that's Dana thinking like, hey, like you just fought. I don't want to expect you to do like a short turnaround for what could be considered now your most important fight in your career. And maybe they're promising Armin something, but based off the current timeline, I'm guessing is that Ilya, he might fight probably by the White House card because there's no way he's going to miss that unless the divorce is actually killing him. And that means if the White House card's around June, then that means someone's going to get screwed out. It's either going to be the interim champion between these two fellas, or it's going to be Arman. Someone's going to have to wait, and we know with UFC, promises given are never kept. Meaning, you could win an interim belt. Tony Ferguson did it. That doesn't mean you're going to get a unification belt, championship match. So maybe it's possible that these two boys fight it out just for the sake of having a good main event for the Paramount card. And either they don't get the immediate shot against Ilya, let's say when he returns at the White House, or maybe they get the shot, but they have to wait until Armin gets it first. It's hard to say. The problem is obviously Patty's a big name, Justin's a big name, Armin's a big name. They're all, to a degree, one's bigger than the other in some ways or another. But you could honestly argue, I don't know, it's tricky. At the end of the day, it's a business, and that's probably why they put these two together, because they know it's a guaranteed going to be a probably striking type fest. And I get that point. It's just the big asterisk is, was Armin offered? And if he was offered, did he not accept it because maybe it would be hard to make weight? It would be hard to jump right back into a full camp to prepare for two of these fellas when these two might have already been pre-preparing, knowing maybe ahead of time that one or both of them was, tentatively going to be on this card regardless. It's hard to say. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and the Paramount card, it's the first one, so it's very important, which is arguably why they wanted to put Justin and Patty as the main, the main attraction, because Patty brings a large audience. Justin is just, I personally think one of the most entertaining fighters in the last, 10 or so years. So they're putting this in the hopes that someone's going to get cracked and KO'd real bad just with their, their new large audience. So I can get that. That's a little more reasonable. This one, this one is a little more tricky. I love Volkanovski. I think Diego Lopez is great. Now, this one gets a little funky because you go to the rankings. Featherweight. Obviously, Volkanovski champ. He beat Diego. I believe he injured his hand or something. He obviously had the eye thing. He essentially went blind. And I think his was actually a knuckle punch. So it's not even like Diego actually poked him. Like, it was legitimate damage he took. He was like essentially blind through like the 4th and partially through the 5th round. So he needed time to heal. He's a little older. He's a legend. He fights frequently, so we can throw him a bone. And they obviously didn't choose to do an interim belt. Instead, they had they had. So this is where it gets funky. You have Diego, who's still two because he beat Gene Silva, cracking spinning elbow. So it was a worthy comeback win. He showed some improvement. He showed he's still a dog. On the flip side, you have Yair Rodriguez, who I believe has been pretty inactive. I want to say he hasn't fought recently. Lerone Murphy, he fought. Oh my god, he fought the debuting Aaron Pico, also spinning elbow, probably one of the KOs of the year. Um, and then Musafar. I can't even say his name right now. Evlev, the emo Dagestanian boy. And I will say, I thought they weren't allowed to have this hair. They get punished, I thought, because it's something like sweat gets in your eyes. That's why they always have like no hair in their head. So I don't know what's going on there, but he reps it. He reps it well. Yeah, he hasn't fought obviously since December 7th, but he's undefeated. He had a good win over former champ Sterling. He has a win over Arnold Allen. He obviously has a win over Diego Lopez. The point I'm making is this is where the bigger conflict, and I actually can relate with this one, is that at the end of the day, UFC is a business. We already pointed out, hey, they have this new Paramount era starting. They gotta really put a good spectacle. They have to put on a good show for the fans, especially when you have a new audience that's probably getting handed to them through Paramount. They want to make sure that when you do stay up for these, these main cards, and even through some of the prelims, that you're going to see entertaining fights. And entertaining fights usually entails actual, high levels of striking, and when I say grappling, it's usually going to be beyond just the simple. Some guy's really good and some guy's really bad, and some guy's going to wet blanket another guy, and he's just stuck at bottom for the full round. They want to see submissions. I think are pretty reasonable, but they got to be like Diego Lopez, where actively chasing them and never really, you know, holding position for the sake of it. The point going back to though is that it's featherweight. Mosvar, I can never say his name. He is the rightful contender. Lerone Murphy, not Leon Edwards. Lerone Murphy, similar region. He's also, you could argue, that they're both undefeated. I believe they both have 8 or 9 wins in the UFC each, no losses. Diego Lopez, the thing with him is he fought Volkanovski, let's see, back in April 12th. So earlier like spring of this year, so 7 months ago. So it's to a degree still relevant in the world of, I'd say, MMA. Like getting a rematch within a year is usually rare unless it's a close fight. But it wasn't. It was a 4-1 decision in favor of Volkanovski. Did he get rocked in the second round? Yes. Did he get his eyes knuckled in real bad, where he looked like he was at times like a chicken with no head in the fourth and fifth round? Yes, but he still won 49-46. He still did a crap ton of damage to Diego, and I believe he outstruck him pretty significantly. The problem is, and it's a business, they need an entertaining fight, especially when they go back down under, Volkanovski's hometown. They want to make sure he gets an entertaining opponent. Diego versus Volkanovski 1 was very entertaining. I expect 2 to be probably better, just because Lopez seems to be improving, and Volkanovski, at the end of the day, is a legend, but he's getting older. So the gap is closing where they're hoping that Lopez can beat him. But then you think this is a sport. Who's the number one contender? Evlev. Evlev has a win against Lopez, no less. On top of that, Lerone Murphy took out, this, what they were kind of setting up Pico to potentially get the shot against Volkanovski. They were like, Pico, legend Bellator, high-level wrestler, crazy boxing power. They were priming him to, potentially get the shot, and then obviously Pico got his head knocked off Beyblade style with that spinning elbow in less than a round. But I look at these tweets too. You have 2 conflicting reports from what are considered the 2 top contenders in this weight class. You have Mr. Evlev, who again I think is like the sad boy here. Leon Murphy, I will give you the opportunity to fight the number 1 contender. Tell your people you're ready to fight me on the same card as the championship. The way I read that is this guy doesn't even acknowledge the fact that he hasn't fought in 2025. Now, one of them, he got injured, I believe, when he was supposed to fight Pico, so that's on his end. But it wasn't like he got rebooked, so he hasn't fought in over a year, let alone this whole calendar year. Not good. And there's obviously been the swirling rumor that because he never gets finishes, I believe he has all decisions in the UFC. They just don't view him as like entertaining, and rightfully so because he has a big fan base, a million plus on Instagram, I believe. At the end of the day, like again for the main audience, like he's at times, and I think he's kind of entertaining some of his fights with Sterling and stuff. But yeah, he's not entertaining. But instead of taking a shot at UFC, he just goes, "Nope, I'm gonna." And I give him respect. It's kind of like Habib when he wasn't getting the shot, where he's just like, "If you won't give me the shot, I'll beat the guy that's the next in line to do it." And obviously, Lerone Murphy is the only other guy in the picture right now, so he's like, "I'll just go fight him. Put me on the same card, no less, so I can call out Volkanovski or Lopez, especially Lopez if Lopez wins to get that rematch, even though he won the first one." But Lerone Murphy, this is where I think this is where it speaks to the heart of the fans and this conflict of UFC as a business versus UFC as a sport. Missing the opportunity to fight one of the featherweight goats is what hurts me the most. It's not about who's the best anymore. It's about who's most popular. He couldn't say it any better, but at the end of the day, it's true. UFC has shown time and time again, Dana White especially, that they will make fights, especially when they're at the marquee, main event, and even for titles, etc. I mean, the BMF belt was made artificially just to, host a main event that couldn't book an actual title fight. Uh, I mean, think back to John Jones Stipe. I mean, there was no reason why that should have been booked. Poor Tom Aspinall, but they booked it because they perceived, okay, Stipe's the GOAT and John Jones is the general GOAT. Therefore, this is going to be a big fight, even if Stipe was way past his prime and shouldn't have fought. Colby Covington, he got multiple title shots. Where the third one, Leon Edwards, I think he had like one win in the last like 2 years. And sure, he was a backup fighter, but they were perceiving it like, oh, it's British versus UK. He's or not British UK. What am I saying? American, hardcore American MAGA boy versus UK homegrown, blah blah blah. Like they obviously, Colby does good numbers, so he's can be a get out jail free card for a main event. The point I'm making is they have picked many a times to put a guy in a position, or in other cases like Marab even, you piss them off or they don't think you're entertaining. They're just gonna keep making you fight guys until you're either undeniable or they need to replace someone short notice or they have to book something and you're the only option, so they have to call you and say, "Will you do it?" And then obviously those people will generally do it. But yeah, these two boys screwed. I mean, yeah, Lopez, he shouldn't be getting it. And it's actually kind of funny too, because my personal opinion is, and based off some of the interviews we were seeing coming out with Volkanovski and his coach, is like they were implying that they thought Evlev or Murphy were going to be the two that they would get next, and they were fine with it. They think they're more deserving. I mean, he's a pretty honorable guy, and I honestly think, and I think a lot of the hardcore fans, and this is where probably the divide is, how many people that are casual. I mean, how many of them know any of these guys outside of like Sterling, because he's a former champ, maybe Rodriguez, especially his home base because he was an intern champ. Yeah, Diego Lopez is probably one of the bigger names just because he fights so frequently. He has the Brazilian slash Mexican fan base, and he's captured a lot, I think, the American fan base because, again, he went through the ranks getting a lot of finishes, taking short nose fights that they heavily promoted that end. So he's just very likable, and on top of that, he has good finishes, and he's developing his English too, so he can get more interviews. Some of those other boys got to take notes, but I honestly think Evlov versus Volkanovski was the fight they should have booked just due to the credentials of Evlov, even if he hasn't fought as frequently as he should have. But because B, I think he was probably the toughest fight for Volkanovski, and C, I think it's probably the most compelling for Volkanovski and his legacy. They always talk about legacy, and for better or worse, how much legacy does Volkanovski get beating Lopez again versus beating an undefeated Dagestanian boy? Especially in this whole recurring theme of they're impervious to losing. They're very hard with their wrestling and grappling. And Evloev is one of the best grapplers, probably the best in featherweight, one of the top in all of UFC. That's why it was so entertaining because Volkanovski did so well against Islam the first time. Islam was a lightweight. So how would he have fared against Evlov? Reaching into his prime a little younger, but also his size, same weight class. And like I said, it would have been a huge feather in Volkanovski's cap to take that win streak. Like I said, to prove that you can get past this Dagestani curse, all this stuff. But instead, he got Lopez, who it's still a good fight. It's not as worthy for his legacy. And you could honestly argue it's in some ways more dangerous because Lopez has that, dangerous striking, unorthodox spinning elbows, this and that, where Volkanovski is again risking his health to, put on a good show for, his hometown and produce some good business. At the end of the day, I am a fan, so I'm never gonna complain because I wanna see these fights. I mean, I wanna see Gaethje and Patty really bad. I think this is very compelling, and I would honestly, down the road, love to see one of them fight Ilya, depending how they look. Uh, I'm very entertained about Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. I think this could be a retirement fight, so that's probably why they're priming it, because they want Diego as the champion. It's pretty clear that they're gonna be favoritized. Oh my, the gas hit. They do want to obviously have a build a presence over. As I think they have a PI in Mexico, so they're obviously trying to build a presence, and they always want to have someone just like they have Zhang Wei Li in China. They want to always have that someone that's like the poster boy, the poster girl, and Diego Lopez is like the leading candidate now that especially the Grasso has been regulated to like fighting. I don't know if she's on the prelims, but yeah, she's probably gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Featured prelim. Yeah, I mean she's had a fall in grace after losing to Valentina, and there was a trilogy, I think, was it? Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, you can't complain on it. I mean, could you boycott it? Whatever, put your comments in, yes. But at the end of the day, I would say, and I think honestly, it's not probably the best advice, but I think in the case of Mazvar Evlov, he's got good spirit. He's saying like put me on the same card, maybe as the undercard, especially if Volkanovski is not actually retiring and he wins. Put him on the undercard. If he can put on a show against Lerone, even if he doesn't get the finish, but he goes and he just, 30-27s him, and you're thinking, damn, he just took that guy's O. That guy was probably in some ways more deserving of the shot because of recency bias, and he smoked him right before we see the main event. And then you see either Volkanovski or Diego win, but they show like some, holes in their game, or they show damage and this and that, and you're thinking Masvidal just like got his 10th win, and he looked, indestructible. He's setting himself perfectly, especially if they let him go in the cage. So I like his attitude. Lerone, he just comes off like I feel like a martial art slash fan at heart, where he's just like actually emotionally distraught that he's legitimately missing the chance, which is possible if Volkanovski retires, he'll never fight him again, which I can relate to. The personal one that I think is at the end of the day is the biggest mystery is, was this too short of notice for Arman? Is it something that weight was going to be an issue, or I honestly don't know. And hopefully he does an interview and says like, A, was he offered, or B, was like I said, is it just timing, or C, was it like potentially injury related, or body fatigue, this and that? Because I mean, I know he cuts a lot of weight, and 8 weeks is a quick turnaround, especially if he rebulked up eating giant eclairs and whatever what else he be eating on his Instagram. But that one's the biggest mystery, because I think compared to the two, you could argue that Armon. I don't know Instagram statistics enough, hence why I have no followers and no likes. But it's hard to say. Like out of the three, Justin is probably the one that casuals know the most out of the three. But on the flip side, Patty brings a strong fan base, a young fan base, on top of his whole England and all that, um, Europe, and then on the third side, you have obviously Armin, who brings a strong like Russian Middle East audience, and I think followers wise, Patty probably has the most. I'm guessing on Instagram, and then Armin's like close second. Maybe he's a little more. Justin's probably definitely third. But if you go off entertainment value, yes, Justin, some people hate, some people like, but recency bias maybe. But I'm like, Justin probably is the most violent, entertaining fighter. He never has a boring fight. The other two have had boring fights, or fights where they don't look that good. Justin, either he goes on a shield or he beheads someone. So I get why he's in there. And I guess Patty's just in some ways that rising star that again carries a whole nation that they tend to go to, and they want to build their you know, relationship partnership with. So I get it, but it is what it is. This rant went a little longer than I expected, but I'm gonna try to do a breakdown, in the next few weeks as we get closer, because there's a lot of other good fights on this card. Sean O'Malley and Song Yudong, especially, I've had interest of, just to see how, especially depends on how Marab and Peter Yan play out. Sean's obviously trying to get back in that picture, but that's for later on. Enjoy the weekend. Like, comment, subscribe, and also tell me if this audio sounds good or bad. I've been trying to play with it, and I've had a hard time self-teach myself how to get a good position for my mic. So if it sounds like garbage, at least tell me in the comments. If it sounds doable, tell me too. But thanks for listening. I'll be sending some more stuff out in the next week or so.